Wow, this is a very balanced group and representation of the industry. That's very exciting. Okay, super. So without any further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you today the moderator and host of this panel, a Folk Alliance International board member, and a real pleasure of a person to work with. I've enjoyed collaborating on this with you very much. Please welcome Amy Reitnouer.
Hi, everyone out there. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry, my cats are fighting at the exact moment I'm supposed to go on camera. That's great. It's a real pleasure to be moderating this today and to have all of these wonderful people joining us, folks that I really admire, and it's been great to dive into some topics with them about the current state of affairs and where we are headed in a very realistic way. And so just to get things started, as Tressa mentioned, we've organized this discussion into 4 categories and with speakers who are well designated for each of those categories in each side of the industry. And as we proceed through those categories, we have pre-selected questions and we'll end up with some live questions at the end. So to kick things off, we thought we would just kind of address from each of our sides of the industry where things stand right now and do a little bit of a state of the union. After that, we'll go into what was already broken, what we already have, and where do we need to go after this. So I will kick it off where we stand right now. I am co-founder and exec director of the Bluegrass Situation, BGS, in addition to my work with BGS, which is a music outlet for folk, roots, Americana, bluegrass, you name it, and presenter of shows and stages at other festivals. I also manage several artists, and I'm on the Folk Alliance Board of Directors. So for me at this time, you know, the day-to-day of BGS has not changed terribly much. We're still putting out media and content every single day. We're still covering artists that are releasing new music. I think one of the biggest, most jarring changes has been just the frequency with which music releases have changed, the kind of stuff that we're covering. And, you know, we present a lot of live shows and events throughout the country. We would produce the Merle Fest Midnight Jam. We've done stages at festivals at Bonnaroo and at Bourbon and Beyond and a lot of other like major festivals, and those are all gone. So with that gap in our schedule, we had to reanalyze how not only were we going to bring in income, but how are we going to just create consistent good content with that being absent. So what we've been working on for the past few weeks is a series called the Whiskey Sour Happy Hour. It was hosted by my co-founder, Ed Helms, and it featured just a lot of artists contributing pre-recorded songs and sessions, which we edited together to raise money for Music Cares and Direct Relief. That's been a great way to kind of put my creative focus to work, but at the same time, you know, there's that question of what's next and how long does this go on, and you know, how much further can we push off not having live events on our schedule? What do we do in that absence? And then there's the other side of my role, which is how do I make sure that the artists that I work with and manage are supported, are keeping busy, are bringing in income, and are still feeling inspired to continue to create in one way or another. So that's kind of what is, I think, has been up against me in my various roles. It's going to be really interesting, I think, to see where the media side of things go with so many layoffs recently, and also just how people approach PR coverage, online shows, all things that we're going to get into a little bit later on this panel. I'm going to throw it to David to talk about the label world.
All right, thanks, Amy. I'm David Macias. I'm with 30 Tigers out of Nashville. We're a label services company who we work with. With a big overlap with a lot of the artists that Amy's outlet covers. So for us, I feel like in certain ways it's been very disconcerting, but as far as the our revenues go, they've actually hung in there. People are still they're still streaming music. They're maybe buying it a little less than they did in the past. Indie stores have been struggling, which for certain labels that have a lot of their business is done in vinyl and all that, it's having a big effect on them. For us, probably about 80% of our revenue is digital, and the vast majority of that is streaming. So people have been actually streaming more music at home. Not that that's necessarily caused the revenues to rise appreciably, because the streaming model, it all the revenue depends on how many subscribers. That subscribers have ticked up some, but not not so much that it's I don't think we're doing quite as well in the streaming music platform as like Netflix or Hulu has in terms of subscribers. But compared to to other people that we will hear from on this panel, I feel like we're getting out a little bit lucky. But we have definitely had to the main things, it's been a challenge. A lot of our artists have wanted to push back their releases, so moving the schedule around has been a challenge, and also in terms of our advertising mix, we're spending a lot more money on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, for instance, and a lot less in outdoor advertising. We've basically done away with a lot of the billboards, wheat pasting, some of the things that we would have considered for bigger acts. So those are the main changes that we've seen. So I think I'll turn the mic over to whoever's next. Back to you, Amy. Then you can kick it over to somebody else.
So Erin is just troubleshooting some tech issues. So let's move on to Enrique.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Enrique, and I'm the founder and leader of a band called Making Movies. And we have for a decade now been a touring act, but also our activism just kind of evolved with the band's work. So we started a music camp in partnership with a local not-for-profit that has evolved into its own organization called Art as Mentorship. And so my life splits between both headspaces, and I'd like to speak a little bit to the band perspective first. Obviously our whole touring season dissipated. We were feeling really grateful to have earned a place after 10 years of touring to finally be getting the type of asks and opportunities on international stages that were not only exciting exposure points, but also the revenue from the touring was finally at a sustainable place where we were drawing enough audience, enough ticket sales, and then also getting enough slots and being chosen in the curation for festivals, where the books were looking really like healthy for the first time in our band's career. Where you start out in a van just excited to get beer money and to crash on floors and that kind of thing. It was exciting, and that has gone away. So we have luckily been able to pivot, and all the band members are healthy and safe and have been able to accept the financial blow without any real crisis mode happening. But we had to dig into a local not-for-profit that does lending to inject some resources into the business. Luckily, it's under amazing terms due to some COVID relief stimulus that they had access to. So we are doing that and then pivoting into Patreon, because touring was about 90% of our revenue, and now that's gone away. So we're at the 75% mark of finishing a new album, and even that went on pause as we went into triage mode to handle all the cancellations and the financial impact that this was having in our lives. But luckily, we're kind of through the triage mode, and now we're looking forward to how to rebrand, refocus our energy on social media, kind of like David was saying. That's become the space where we're going to invest our energy and our most important resource, our time, to figure out how to really connect with our audience and then pull them into a patronage infrastructure that hopefully when touring comes back, that's just an additional revenue stream. The not-for-profit is programming had to switch to virtual programming, and I won't go into all the details of that, but the amazing part is that we've kind of hit a window of opportunity with our programming where we're still impacting young songwriters, but because my friends are home from tour, all of a sudden we're creating these. The program, the Rebel Song Academy, is like this program for young songwriters using songwriting as a tool for self-actualization. And because everybody's home from tour, we've had webinars with Ed from Chicano Batman, Louis from Los Lobos. We have one planned with Kevin Morby next week, and these webinars have this amazing vibe and are creating organic groundswell around the organization. So that's been a really beautiful outcome out of something that's kind of stressful, which is all my friends are out of work and having to figure out how to cope with that. So I'm grateful to be giving them some work, even if it's just a one-day honorarium thing, but work, and also the good vibes of just being influential and a mentorship role for young people. Oh, Amy, I think you might be muted.
You're muted.
I couldn't find my panel. Sorry, too many windows open.
All right.
Okay, so Megan, let's go to you and hear about what you're up to.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan West, and I'm the Global Head of Commercial Label Partnerships at Facebook Inc. And, I would say in the last few months, we've seen a huge shift in terms of, behavior and people coming onto the platform in a variety of different ways as people are looking to connect and looking to express themselves and build community. And, I think one of the things that we've been sort of thinking about as we have been looking at sort of what's been happening is we've been seeing things sort of happen in phases, and the way that we've been sort of reacting to the shifts in the world. The first phase for us was really around health and safety. The first thing that we sort of thought about as all of the world was changing and people were trying to figure out what this all meant was, how do we help people get the right information, right? That they know what is the right information to keep them and their families safe. And so a lot of that was working with folks like the WHO and the CDC to help share correct information, and asking our artists and label partners to help get that information out to their fans as well, to help everyone sort of figure out what sort of happens next. From there, we kind of moved into a second phase that was really focused in on things to what Enrique said around fundraising, right? So how do we help folks that are now at home figure out what that means from sort of a new standpoint, whether that's, raising money for charitable causes through things like Facebook Lives plus Donates, which a whole variety of artists have done, which has been really amazing to see. We rolled out features like that around Instagram with Live plus Donate as well. And even a partnership that we took with the National Arts Council in Canada as well around an initiative called Canada Performs that's supporting musicians and performers in Canada through a series of grants and a variety of activities, and we're continuing to expand on that. We actually announced an additional expansion to that program today for the next few years as we look at what the future might mean for performing artists in Canada and the opportunities to tour. We've kind of moved from that into a third phase, which we're still in now, where it's really about, how do we continue to think about community building? Because I think, the one thing that we're all balancing right now is how long is this going to last? Some communities are opening up, some aren't, but still people really coming online to connect, and whether it's through things like what we're doing right now as a webinar, or wanting to connect with family and friends. And so there's a variety of things that we've looked at bringing to market really quickly around that. One of the more recent releases was the Rooms product, which enables you to get people together sort of organically to hang out. But and there's more to come. And I think the next thing that we're really focused on, and something that's really sort of top of mind for my team kind of across these and where things go next is really how this all then leads into promotion and fan connection. Because I think that the biggest thing that we're seeing and the biggest opportunity we're finding, and for artists that are engaging on the platforms, is this idea of you know, how comfortable are you sort of getting in front of a camera and being in this space? It's awkward for all of us, but some of us are now doing it 12 hours a day for work, more so than we might have ever thought we would. But how do you create both tools and opportunities for artists to have those platforms be able to connect authentically with their fans and be able to express what this means, whether it's creatively, you know, to what Enrique was saying about doing Zoom songwriting calls and connecting with fellow creatives, or finding ways to be in the moment with fans as they're sort of experiencing this as well. So there's a lot that we're continuing to think about around that as we both think about new features coming to market, but then also a lot of what my team does is working with folks like David's team to help, you know, educate labels and artists on what they really can do across the platforms and how you can really make them work to help you achieve your goals as things continue to evolve.
Thank you, Megan. I want to say Erin will be joining us. And
can you hear me by any chance?
Oh, we can hear you. Yeah.
But you can't see me.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
All right, I'm gonna do something I'm gonna MacGyver this.
Oh, there you are.
There you are.
Bizarre. Anyway, I'm very
Erin,
sorry.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
At this point, I have no idea who I am. I just had my children bring me my breakfast, which is a peanut butter sandwich, sitting on the couch where I've been since 7:30 this morning. Hi, and I do apologize for the technical misstep and being late. My name is Erin Benjamin. I'm the president and CEO of the Canadian Live Music Association. I'm based in Ottawa, former board member of Folk Alliance, and involved in a variety of different organizations in a volunteer capacity. And would you like me to address a specific question? I'm sorry, I haven't been able to hear the audio until now.
No, that's okay. We just kind of each have been talking about kind of the state of the union for us individually and what we've been working on, but I also know that you're going to get a little more into that probably in our next segment. If you want to, you can do it now or wait a beat, whatever you'd like.
Well, so I'm in Canada. Obviously, the state of the live music industry is a disaster, and it's getting harder by the day. And I can talk about specific details. And I know when we had our pre-call last week, Amy, I was trying to be as upbeat as I could be, but there's very little good news here. Sure, there's lots of silver linings and lots of good will come of this and all of those things. But right now we are looking at an incredible attrition in the Canadian live music industry, and the for-profit companies will be particularly impacted, but the nonprofit sector as well will be struggling for the foreseeable future with no end date in sight.
That's actually, thank you, Erin, and that's a great segue for those who maybe tuned in a little bit late or we're just getting acclimated with all of us, to really focus in on why we're doing this today and what reinventing the broken wheel means. So something that's come up a couple times on other panels that I've watched or been part of has really been not addressing the realities or just skimming the surface. And while we don't have all the answers, we want to at least be able to talk about what a new normal could look like and what we're all working towards to identify ways around a lot of the challenges that the COVID crisis has presented. And you know, I think the biggest thing that we've kept coming back to is speaking about this realistically, and that it's pretty gnarly, you know, and like Erin said, there's some really horrible things happening right now, but are there also opportunities to innovate and move the industry in a different direction in positive ways? So it's not just about positive spin. I think we want to speak very frankly and address your questions as well towards the end. Okay, so moving along, our next segment is identifying what was broken and what we're really seeing break right now. Our first topic being preparedness and protections. So Erin, why don't you kind of talk a little bit more about what you're seeing right now, we don't have to go in this exact order. So if you want to dive into the triple threat thing that you spoke about last week, that would be cool. But I think dive into the business fallout that you're seeing, because I know that also affects the US market as well.
Yeah, so first hit, last to recover, and a lingering fan concern around gatherings. So that's a triple threat in the absence of a vaccine, and even post-vaccine. We have some recent research which was just shared from our colleagues at Music Canada, the Major Label Association, just this week. And I encourage everyone to look at it because it is very compelling and probably transferable to a certain extent based on wherever it is you live. Just looking at the consumer, how consumers are feeling about returning to various kinds of venues. So small lead music clubs all the way up to traveling to the United States for a concert. These are the kinds of questions we ask, because it helps us to know if you're comfortable going to a concert in the US, and we know you're going to be engaging with live music at all levels in Canada. And so knowing this is all this research is helping to guide us to a certain extent. It's also helping to inform government, and we are in the, I guess, still enviable position of having this funding relationship in some cases in the music industry with government and everything. We're trying to establish benchmarks and to inform policy moving forward. And there's a lot of policy work going on in my world right now. We're attempting to sort of educate government on the complexities and nuance of the live music industry ecology. So for example, production tech companies, companies and organizations government wouldn't have a direct one-on-one relationship with before, and now they may need to help breathe life into the full sort of the infrastructure, so that when we hit the ground running, there'll be some sort of recovery even possible. I want to make sure I'm staying on track with your question, Amy, but the triple threat is a way that is a sort of a notionally sort of context we're using now to help both industry and government understand what's going to be necessary beyond the government relief measures that we're seeing. So yeah, working on that.
Awesome. Thank you for your work on that too. I know it's nonstop, especially right now. So I think the pyramids of power and preparedness, other than being very alliterative, all go together in the way I want to address it, and I want any of you guys to chime in on this too. But the thing that I'm seeing and recognizing is, first of all, when speaking to live music, I think the thing that's really jarring is that when live music does come back, as Erin mentioned, it was the first to close, it's the last to come back for venues, and that's for those venues that survive this financially. It's going to be who's going to, like, what artists are going to make audiences feel comfortable enough to come back to those venues to begin with, right? So what I've been hearing is that a lot of it's going to be underplays for bigger artists. So in Los Angeles, where I'm based, for instance, if we can't have, gatherings of more than 1,000 for the next 6 to 9 months, Taylor Swift might play the El Rey at a 900 cap for 6 nights versus Staples Center. And so that then creates this really unfortunate trickle down effect for those artists who would normally play an El Rey or these smaller independent venues, that they won't be able to necessarily book those rooms. They won't be able to get their touring back on time exactly in a way that other bigger artists could. There's also, there's also the question with artists of, like, should artists have to tour all the time in order to make to barely make a living in a lot of cases? And should it be that the runway is so short that the second that live music is cut off, so many of them, a majority of artists are struggling and struggling to find other ways to make a living? And also, bigger questions of physical and mental health that I think piggyback onto that. Enrique, do you want to touch on that?
Well, I think that the music industry has evolved over the last decade, well, maybe over the last 20 years. It's never been particularly favorable to the artists. I think if we go back to the blues musicians from 100 years ago, it was probably even worse. But the idea is that anytime you have music become a commodity, often the artist is left out of the equation. But over the last decade, with the amazing tools that we have with streaming and with social media, artists, like every year, I literally, you are asked to make more stuff, make more content, like make a record, make music videos, make a record, make music videos, make social media posts about music videos, make record, make music videos, make shout outs to Pandora, to this application, make music video, like, and the list is longer, and the percentage of the revenue stream that you can make from your recorded work or content shrinks. And so your capacity is being demanded more of, and the revenue back is shrunk. Yet still to this point, the way someone experiences your music is still tenfold or more, maybe 100-fold the recording versus the live show. Right? Somebody listens to a song 1,000 times before they go see the gig, or they're incentivized to see the gig. So that equation that I think has been broken for a minute now is exasperated in this moment where when artists are playing 100 and some odd dates a year to make a living, and I think for most people probably listening to this webinar, this won't be shocking, but making movies grew in a community in Kansas City that has not supported a lot of touring artists, a lot of generative artists that are making a living from an audience of their own of their own making. And so just the simple economics that, like, for an artist to make $2,000 a month, just a livable honorarium for their work, that means that your band's touring business has to make $20,000 a month, and the amount of shows and the amount of tickets you have to sell for that, you have to have a pretty sizable audience, and that's just like sustaining a livable wage. Well, I fear for all those artists who are lucky enough to be at that level and beyond, where they are expecting to make a living from playing gigs, that the fact that the artists that are a couple tiers above them are now crashing down to try to take the spots that they had. I'm not so certain how that all plays out without a bunch of I think it might put some artists that have hundreds of thousands of people treasuring them on the brink of bankruptcy, and that seems like a broken equation, right? That you've created a business that is of service to 100,000 people, just to make it that simple, and now there's no way or there's your main way to kind of monetize that has gone away. That's the break that I guess provides the opportunity to say, well, if there's 100,000 people listening to my music, how do I find a new way to monetize that? Because the old way is going to be off for sites. I would say that our agent and our agents with APA, and he does acts, $100,000 a night acts like Ziggy Marley and Macias and bands like that. And his advice to us, because we're not at that level, was just, for as long as you can steer clear of the mess, stay out of it. Trying to get a booking even a year in advance right now, there's nothing for you. So stay clear.
And there's something else too. Sorry to jump in, but the note. How are we supposed to keep our artists safe in this? Like, at which point? I mean, artists are the ones getting in and out of the van, and the tour bus, the hotel, different venues, different green rooms, different. I mean, just to get your head around that. I mean, the landscape, like everything is just off the table right now. And if I was still an artist, and I'm glad I'm not right now, would I feel comfortable going out even? I mean, it's just the amount of time is going to take, the rigor that it will require for venues of all sizes and festivals to make sure not only patrons are safe, but artists are safe, staff, crew, front of house, back of house, whatever, are safe. Is just we're talking a lot about that in Canada right now. Even when artists can go back on the road, how do we protect them?
And that's not to say anything for state to state, and I don't know if it's a province to province issue as much as it is a state to state issue down here, Erin, but with the reopenings being so different just across a state line or just across a county line, how can artists keep track of what is safe, what they need to do, or how they need to be prepared depending on where they're touring? I'm going to move things along just because we're around the halfway mark of this panel. So this is actually a really good segue. Enrique, you literally said the words new forms of monetization, and I was like, that was perfect. So here we go. Next slide is what we have and how to adapt it, because I think this is very bleak, and for artists especially, that's what this all comes down to. But are there things that we currently have or are currently being developed that can help fix some of this, or can at least allow us to see it differently? I'll throw to Megan and David.
Well, if I might, Megan, I'll jump in on the new forms of monetization. I mean, I think this is a real, could be, I think, a real tipping point in terms of artists and their relationship with the people that put their music out. I've thought for a long time. I mean, I came out of the major label world, and there's a lot of value in a label structure. Enrique, as you talk about a multitude of mediums in which to try to get your music and your message out. It also takes people, or it can help to have people who can advocate in those mediums, for you. So at the same time as that revenue pool, as you're trying to figure out, how to manage the revenue pool so that everybody can earn a living. I think that certain models. I mean, one thing 30 Tigers, and I don't, this feels, I feel weird going like, well, what we're doing is really a solution, but I really do think that, we're artists, when they put their music out through us, they get that infrastructure, but they also keep 75% of their gross revenues. They keep 100% of what they sell on the road. If you're going to be on Patreon, they get 100% of that. Basically, they are their own entity, and we serve them, but we take a much smaller piece of the pie. And as a result, I think, we serve a lot more utility for them because they can actually earn a living. I think things like that, I think artists are going to have to really, sort of think about the relationship about that. I mean, the truth is there's a lot of money in streaming. The total music business went from a 7 billion, I'm speaking about the US here. The US went from a $7 billion industry about, 5 years ago to now, last year it was about 11 billion. So that money's coming in. It's just a matter of how much of it goes to the artists and goes to the creatives. And I think artists have a lot more leverage than they're aware of. No one that I have ever known has bought a 30 Tigers record. They might have bought a Making Movies record, but the artist and their work is the only thing that they give a shit about. And so artists need to understand that they actually have a lot more leverage in that in that situation. They're the reason people are showing up and spending money. So so at any rate, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan and let her weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what we're seeing, and I think the other things that are kind of interesting about what's happening is that, with the lack of live events happening, people are turning to social media, right? They want to connect. They still want to hear from their favorite artists, regardless of whether they're a superstar or it's somebody who's just starting out, and looking for ways to connect. And I think also, understanding that folks aren't feeling alone in this. And so a lot of what we've seen, and where we've seen a lot of really interesting, I think, opportunity for artists of all sizes is this ability to be online and being able to speak directly to your fans, right? And so what are those opportunities to continue to build those relationships? Because the reality is if you, build a relationship with your fan, even if they may not be able to see you live, then that's going to get them to go stream your music, right? And it's going to get them to dive in other ways around the artist. And so we've seen, everything from, artists actually going live on our platforms, and performing that way, just to keep people excited and doing that as a way to sort of build up money for charitable causes. People are using it and driving people into other places like a Patreon or other places for monetization, which I think is super interesting. We've also launched a product recently. It's in beta testing called Stars that I think is more relevant to some of the more developing artists or artists that are starting out, where fans can actually, instead of just liking something or like hearting something on Facebook, they can actually tip the artist. It's like having a tip jar on the stage, or if you're busking, can actually tip the artist, right? And give them stars as a way to sort of drive some revenue, which we think is really interesting, and you know, are looking to expand that further for artists that are open to doing that. But we've also heard from, you know, a variety of artists too, that they don't necessarily want that fan artist connection in the social space to feel monetized. They don't want to feel like they're asking for money, because they want it to be a relationship. And so I think, you know, with that, then it's a bit about, you know, how do you then find ways to build that relationship? We've seen it from everything from, you know, artists performing, as I mentioned, to artists just going live at sort of a regular time during the week to check in with fans, right? It could be something as simple as, you know, as Amy was talking about the whiskey sour hour. You know, we've got artists that are doing that, where it's like, hey, I'm hanging out at this time, come hang out with me, right? And let's sort of like, I'm going to go live, ask me questions, you can go live with me, and let's just hang out and talk. And that ability to sort of open up and show fans that you're a real person too, and be able to build that relationship. Even, you know, artists that are actually teaching lessons online. So I'm teaching their fans how to play some of their favorite songs. We've had big artists doing that, smaller artists doing that, even as a way to sort of show fans, you know, what a part of that process is around creativity. And then from there saying, look, like, here's how we wrote this song. Now go stream it, right? Go listen to it, go driving people into those other places where they can monetize. But that's one of the things that we're thinking a lot about. You know, as I said before, like going through these phases, so much of the first weeks and months were, oh my gosh, is everybody safe? Is everyone healthy? And now we're thinking about, like, what do folks need, you know, in terms of ways to sort of build back their businesses, and other things that we're looking at, and something we actually announced just yesterday, Wednesday. I don't know, I can't keep the days straight anymore. But is actually the ability for folks to actually, you know, sell merch and things like that through Facebook or through Instagram. So that ability to be able to drive to a product in a way that feels authentic, but being able to connect fans around something they really care about, right? If they really love your music and they really want to support you, they've got that ability to still go up and buy a t-shirt or buy a record. And, you know, those are things that are tools that we're rolling out to make available to anyone. It could be a small artist. It could be, you know, Taylor Swift, as you mentioned before, Amy, but that ability for artists to find new ways to connect with their fans, and then hopefully get them as quickly to that sort of commerce opportunity in a way that feels authentic to the artist, without necessarily feeling. A lot of what we hear is like, I don't want to feel like I'm selling myself too hard, right? In the ways that I'm connecting with my fans directly. So how can we help make that work in a way that feels true to the artist's spirit and the way that they're building those relationships?
But I do think that artists are going to have to get comfortable with monetizing the live streaming, you know, the live streaming platforms. I mean, they're just they're going to have to. And I do think that there's a potential relationship. I'm curious, Erin, what you think. I mean, I think about the venues. You know, they have their mailing lists, they have their, you know, their social media. I mean, they're a, you know, a community gathering spot and are used to communicating with people. We just had Jason Isbell do a hugely successful live stream with Brooklyn Bowl, where, you know, they were actually they were in Brooklyn Bowl. It was just Jason and Amanda. It was just the two of them. They took care of all the precautions. It felt a little weird, but they actually like put up screens so that people were watching. You know, they actually would like pan to people that were watching. It was actually really, really cool. And Jason did this primarily as a charitable thing. You know, he covered his costs out of it, but for Music Cares. But just in terms of the overall like money coming in, I do feel, I'm curious to know what you think about the possibility that venues can, you know, either use their buildings or at least use their you know, their lists of trying to help aggregate enough people to then, you know, have a different way for artists to, you know, to interact with. I mean, it feels like that could be a stopgap, or maybe even a longer term solution.
Or the reality for the next 5 years. Yeah, it's already happening for sure. And I mean, in Canada, there's all kinds of examples of venues who are coming up with creative solutions, whether, because we know that our public health officers we're looking at like starting with the minimum kind of capacity that like 25% cap or whatever, which we know doesn't work financially. So there may be some of those venues that try that. We have Side Door. You're familiar with Side Door? They're great. Anyone watching, please look up Side Door. They're out of Halifax. It's an amazing woman named Laura Simpson working with Dan Mangan, great Canadian artist. And they started out sort of kind of trying to facilitate a different kind of concert experience for both fans and artists. And now they've sort of pivoted very quickly. They already had a very successful product, and they pivoted very quickly and are now able to continue their work so they're working both in empty venues and some other sort of rooms to I spoke to Laura the other day. They're hiring people to run this company now, which is amazing. So I think we'll see, and this is a great example of innovation, and we'll see more and more things like this pop up from the Drive-In Festival, which is, you know, sweeping the continent. Like, we'll see how long that lasts, but I think it's better than nothing, right? But really, I think at least, and it could just be me, like I'm very shell shocked as a human being right now, because it like we're a very small team at the association, and I don't get to look up very often, and it's the end of a particular long week. So I sometimes hear myself talk, and it's very gloomy. But I would say that we're still very much in the first phase of this. We are still, I call it phase one. We are still, I mean, trying to just figure out who we can save. And when we get through this, and this is actually going to be an optimistic comment, I think that we'll see, even with the companies who survive, I think we'll see even more innovation in ways that we can't even imagine yet. I love thinking of venue people as creative people, and of course they are, and they're going to get their chance to shine really soon. So no doubt there'll be more on the horizon of this, all of this sort of inverting the concert experience to things we could never have imagined would be necessary.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Erin. And you know, I know Enrique has a point that he wants to jump in on here per this conversation, so I'm going to throw to him.
So I was listening to what Megan had to say, and also what David, but speaking first to what Megan had to say about the finding ways to not feel like the digital space is just being monetized. The interaction with fans is being monetized, because that kind of dehumanizes the idea. The solutions that we've came up with, though they're not a perfect fit for everyone, I think may serve to have people's wheels turn. So I feel the same way. Like, if I got up and try to do a music class about the roots of making movies music, or how songwriting works for us, and then try to monetize that to our audience, it would feel grimy and disrespectful to me. And maybe that's not for everyone, and you know, let's say it's wrong to do so. But not everyone has a decade long of doing activist work that birthed a not-for-profit that now has 3 years of existence and community goodwill and all this stuff. So it's not a perfect solution for everyone, but us putting that work as something that happens, these conversations happen for youth, and they're free for youth to participate in, and then we're asking folks to support the not-for-profit, feels like it makes that ask, it pivots it in a way that is a lot more comfortable. And now we are thinking, how does our organization as a not-for-profit become maybe a widget for other artists to do similar things, so that they can acknowledge the fact that doing this work requires funding. People have to be able to make a living, but it feels more comfortable to do so in that way. And I think that's kind of the space where things have to move to. And then the other idea about how much money is in streaming, I think that there for artists, it's still effectively, for the amount of time and expense and marketing muscle that goes into it, Like we have a very similar deal with a company called 1RPM that to what we have with what David's doing, and it is part of the solution. What companies like David are doing is part of artists being able to build sustainability. But even at a space, I'm going to make these numbers super simple, but even at a space where you have 500,000 Spotify listeners, so that means that across your multiple platforms, there's a lot of people listening to your music, some people downloading it. Digital revenue is, this is again super rough, but if you've been fairly aggressive with your distributor or your label partnership, maybe you're pulling in 10 grand, maybe a little more than that, depending. But just to make it, let's dumb it down. Let's say it is 10 grand. That does sound like, wow, it's amazing. That's a ton of money. But an artist, if you're doing that, you're still having to sustain a lot of the infrastructure yourself. So the publicity expenses, the social media marketing expenses, the content creation for all the different content vehicles that you're using to push people to come to stream your music, all those expenses start eating away at that. Your team, your 20% goes to your manager and business manager, and then you're left with like, okay, that's more like 5 grand a month. And with, again, if you're a solo artist, hell yeah, that's amazing to make 5 grand a month as passive revenue. You go to a band and it starts being like, well, I can't devote 40 hours a week to this. You know, it doesn't add up. And then all the content creation, all the things that, like, the more DIY you do it, the less time you have for the other parts of your career. So it's still not, in my opinion, it's still not a sustainable equation. That equation to me is broken. And so Patreon is how we're pivoting. We haven't launched it yet, but that's where we're going to experiment, because some people have been successful at monetizing our content. So there's a little bit of revenue being made, even if it's not that much, but it's every time we make content, it's not a loss ledger for the business. It at least even could break even, a music video breaking even. And then it starts to look more sustainable.
Yeah, but I also think it's not a this or this. It's a this and this. It's always in this world. It's an and. You know, so your streaming money plus your Patreon money and the experiences that you're going to give people through Patreon and serving them, with unique content and with dedicated messaging and things like that. You know, it's like you're going to be sort of earning that money or giving people sufficient value in order for that relationship. But I think it's because, like, you got to, like, you in this day and age, you just got to, like, figure out how to pull it in from everywhere that you can. I just no, but I feel like if it weren't for streaming, I think the reason why I defend the streaming platform is, I think right now, if it weren't for streaming and that consistent sort of monthly subscription fee, that I think we'd probably be in a position not unlike what Erin and her constituency are fighting right now. And I'm grateful for the switch to streaming, and I'm thankful for the streaming services. So
I'm going to jump in to kind of move us along and actually pepper in a couple questions from the audience while we're moving through this, rather than just putting them at the end, because I think some of them are really relevant. But before I do that, I want to go back to something that Erin said, which is about the next few years. And I think that's something that was actually part of the impetus of this entire panel, was having conversations where people were talking about the next few months, which it's important for us to look at the next few months and the next year ahead. But this is not going to be gone by December. This is not going to be gone by January. This is going to affect the entire future, track of our industry in one way or another. And so it's about looking at the 4 or 5 year plan. There's an article that I was planning to talk about later in this panel, but I feel like this is a good conversation right now, so I'm just going to let it flow. There's an article that went kind of viral called "The Hammer and the Dance" that I believe they're going to drop into the chat if you guys want to look that up at some point. But it's a really good point of reference just for how the next few years could look. And it's talking more about a societal flow to things, but it's extremely relevant to, I would say, to any industry. And so essentially the hammer is when lockdown goes into place, right? And that's like when it falls, that's the hammer. The dance is the back and forth of trying things out with reopening, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, pulling back, and it's that back and forth testing phase. So what we need to keep in mind is that the dance is going to look different for different parts of businesses. It's going to look different for different regions and countries, and for places that are more affected versus less affected by this pandemic. But there's one pull quote that the author shared that really stuck with me. At any point, if there is another outbreak or surge, the hammer could come back down. The idea is that how we step, how we move, how we dance right now will be indicative of our future success. And so we need to start thinking about this in a multi-year timeline. And we also need to start thinking about this as not a linear line between this is where we are and this is where venues are going to look, or this is what touring is going to look like, or releases or whatever. It's going to be a lot of push and pull over the next few years as we figure things out. So I'll step off my soapbox about the hammer and the dance for a minute and drive into some questions. Okay, so one of the questions we got here is, from a small presenter perspective, what we're seeing is that people are not missing music. They have access to lots of music. They are missing community around the music. Connection with the artists, yes, but also, and perhaps even more, each other. What are successful ways people have been finding to create the feeling of a shared experience for audiences when presenting online content? Does anybody want to dive into that one?
I can dive in on some of the things that we've been seeing, if that's helpful in the online space. So we've actually seen some really, really cool things develop through the use of things like Facebook groups. So there's a whole variety of things where people have been coming together on different topics. One of the ones that I personally think is really interesting is a global group that's spun up that's, many tens of thousands of members now, where people are basically singing their own versions of songs. So they come together, they vote on the song, they vote on a theme, and then people upload their videos into this group because they miss that shared experience around an artist or a song or a moment or a feeling. And it's people all over the globe. I mean, I think one of the biggest sing-along groups that we have, it's over 40,000 people that are participating in it on a regular basis because of that aspect of community, right? And so we've seen that, like I said, like around sing-alongs, we've seen it around sporting activity and people reliving sort of moments and highlights and things that they miss, and being able to have that ability to pull people together around common experiences is awesome. But I think one of the things that's also great about it is for artists or for venues and promoters too, in terms of like if there's communities that you represent or folks that you work with, you can also dive in on these. And we've seen artists go in and then like randomly pop up in the sing-along group and they upload their version, right? And people don't expect it. And it's a really beautiful way to sort of build community and show presence in a way that I think is really different. Some of the other things that we're seeing is around, as I mentioned before, we've got this Rooms product that creates the ability for people to just sort of be together and hang out, and you can do it scheduled like we're doing right now, or you can just sort of be in there and your friends can pop in and out. And we're seeing people starting to use that as different ways to be able to come together as community. And it's something that it's only on profiles right now. It's not on pages yet. So for any of you that have pages for your artists or for your venues, it's not there yet. We're working on that. But I can see some really interesting things there too, as you think about, hosting sort of like a mini show or a meet and greet, or, a chance to get together with like super fans or, things like that around a topic, or wanting to get together and even talk about like, David thinking about the performance that Jason and Amanda did, like a pre-show or post-show, like get together and hang out and talk about it and get excited about it, and giving people a reason to sort of gather. And that's one of the big things that we're thinking about, right? Is community is so hard, and yet I don't know about you all. I'm on probably 12 hours of calls like this a day. And so I don't necessarily feel like I'm alone because I'm with people all day. It's exhausting in a different way than maybe being in a room with people. But how do we find ways that, knowing that this is going to be different for everyone, that people can still sort of come together and feel like they're able to effectively communicate and share? And that's something that we're continuing to work through and will continue to be focused on for the future.
I would also say, when we did Whiskey Sour Happy Hour, we premiered it. It was pre-recorded and edited together. It was about an hour and 20-minute long show each week. And so that went live and got premiered on YouTube and Facebook simultaneously, because we have very different audiences on both of those channels. And so, but especially using YouTube as an example, I couldn't premiere it without having the live chat. And I was really nervous about that because that's not something we've ever really incorporated into previous premieres or events that we've done on YouTube specifically. And and there are ways in which those can go completely left of center. But I was so pleasantly surprised by what a community that felt like, and people that came back week after week and were greeting each other and were commenting on the artists and were discovering artists and asking for more information. And it really became a dialogue. And we had virtually no negative comments or anything abusive or spam related. It was surprising. And I think also, this is another way in which in what Erin was speaking to with and David with the virtual use of real venues, that hopefully they can find ways they have a community. A lot of these venues and spaces, they already have a community built in that love them and go back time and time again. And so I hope that there are ways in which those communities can get engaged online and still feel like they're together in some way or another. So I do want to.
Yeah. Erin's got to go. So I think, yes. Right, Erin?
I do, but can I just say one thing before I go, in addition to thank you and nice to meet you all. And this is for Megan, who we haven't met. But just to what you were just saying, in terms of community, it was because I want to thank you and your company, because our friends at the National Arts Center here in Ottawa, Ontario, started something called #Canada Performs in partnership with Facebook. And they hit the ground running so quickly. They transformed this country. I've watched those shows. They give artists hope. They brought people together. It's still happening. They just announced today that it would become a permanent series of the National Arts Center. They inspired other countries around the world. And I would say that in terms of things that are bringing communities together, the Canada Perform series, thanks to Facebook and the National Arts Center and others, has, I think, made Canadians instantly feel like no matter what, we're going to be okay. And that is thanks to live music, and it's thanks to corporate leadership, and it's been amazing. Much like this group of panelists, and much like the Folk Alliance community. And I want to thank you, and I'm very, very sorry for busting in at the last minute. I've just officially fired myself as a future Folk Alliance panelist for all time.
No, you've been great.
Yeah, awesome. I would encourage anyone watching who wants to be in touch to please reach out. And to any Canadians on the call, just hang in there and try and get some kind of weekend under your feet. Thank you, everyone, and I apologize for leaving early. Take care.
No, thank you, Erin. Hang in there too. You're doing tough work. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I think the last segment that we had scheduled was where do we need to go, and I think we're already kind of digging into that. I'd like to keep that conversation open. If there are specific topics that you guys want to talk about from this slide, we can by all means dig into it. But I kind of want to address a couple of the other questions here. How are you guys feeling? Is there anything you want to speak to first, or just
ask away? I think, yeah, just lead us.
Great. Exciting! You have no idea what I'm about to say. So one of the questions that we just got in is, can you speak to the pros and cons of releasing new music without the ability to tour behind it? I know I have a couple thoughts on this, but I'd love for you guys to chime in first.
Well, that's a challenge we're facing every single day. Definitely the inability for an artist to be in a specific market has, whenever an artist would be in Pittsburgh, we would have them on WYEP and encourage them to play the record, and the publicist would try to get something going in the Pittsburgh Alternative Weekly, and so now that that's sort of off the table, we're having to really rethink how we're getting to people and what kind of message that we're taking to people. And the message around the art is not appreciably different, but the mediums in which we have that conversation are I don't even say appreciably different, but we've definitely focused a lot more on right now it's all about press and social media. The good news is that people are home, they're starving for content, they're wide open. I think we've seen with the new Lucinda Williams record, with the new Jason Isbell record, the press pickup and the reverberation of it has felt much deeper than the normal release, because I think people have a lot less pulling at them, we're feeling like, one artist that isn't ours, like Waxahachie, when she put out her new album, which is great, by the way, that it felt like that was all over the press and all over social media. And I felt because everybody was sort of still and watching, that and following their social media feeds, I think it led a lot of people to her music. She had the best debut she's ever had. So I think, and like I said, the overall consumption is there. It has shifted to catalog more than new music, but we're breaking through. It's just, but if for artists that aren't comfortable engaging with social media platforms, we have one hip hop artist who has steadfastly refused to do interviews, but that's changing now, and it looks like so. I think. I mean, there's I think there's hope. I mean, artists just, they have to reconcile themselves. I mean, Lucinda Williams is doing some things that she's never done before. She's doing them joyfully, and really embracing whatever this present is for the time being. But she's doing live streams with other artists. She's doing all kinds of things and keeping herself present and getting the message out about her music, and it's working. And that happens with bigger artists, and it happens with with more developing artists as well. So it's I've been heartened. I was very worried for about the first few weeks, but it's been okay.
I have a short thing to add to that. That I think that on the challenge side of it, obviously the fact that you can't be in the markets like you said, but also if an artist, our band doesn't all live in the same city, part of our band lives in LA, so creating the content around the release can be challenging because of more logistical things. But the upside is that we foolishly, arguably, neglected social media, and as it was mostly my bad leadership to just be like, this is not real connection. Let's just be a punk band and play a million shows until we have an audience. And I guess it worked, but this is forcing us to slow down and really think through creative ways to engage people. And that's actually the whole bit, is engaging people on your music. So I think the creativity that you're being forced to do is good. Like I'm excited about it, about the digital space for the first time, I think, in my entire life. And secondly, I would recommend for artists on the line, there are more bored people in the world than ever before. And things like, for example, our manager teaches an artist development course, and these amazing interns had lined up internships at Live Nation, internships at major record labels, but all those internships went away because they can fly to New York for 6 months and do the internship or whatever. So there's like talented, gifted, creative young people or people of any age that are home and bored. And so if you can figure out a way to organize a small digital army, this would be a time to do it. So I think that that's something to consider.
Yeah, and I think
Got 2 minutes left, by the way. Go ahead.
I would say just quickly, on the digital side, I think that the biggest things to keep in mind, whether it's a new record or its catalog, is when you're out there and connecting with fans, whether you're an artist or you're working with your artist to do that or a venue, it's I've sort of said it before, but I'll keep it really simple. It's authenticity and consistency, right? So to Enrique's point of like, I wouldn't feel comfortable teaching lessons and asking for money, then don't do it, right? Like, don't do something that's going to make you feel like, doesn't feel like it's true to who you are as an artist and the way you want to connect with your fans. Because the whole opportunity here with social is to let them into the part of your world that you feel comfortable with connecting with them on. And that's what people are looking for as they're sitting at home. Like, they want to know, what you're about and what you stand for and why your music's meaningful. But doing that in a way that feels true to you is the really important thing, because they'll see through it, in an instant. And then I think on the consistency point, to Amy's point about like the, whiskey sour happy hours, doing things in a manner that encourages people to tune in. So lives are awesome, but people have to remember to tune in. And so one, it's about promoting to get people there, but then doing something where it's every Tuesday at whatever time or things like that means that you've got a great opportunity for fans to put it on their calendar and know when to tune in. And because social media is global, you can reach a global audience. So you're not just limiting yourself to one city or one state where you're touring. You can reach fans anywhere. You just got to make sure that you've taken the time to get the word out to them in advance.
Thank you. It is going to be very different. And this is, it's not going to be us returning to normal. It's going to be a new normal. And this is up to us and all of you watching and everyone out there to help create that together. And at the end of the day, I mean, even in the Great Depression, the expendable money that people did have, a lot of times it went to entertainment. It was those little joys. And I think at the end, like, yes, our economy is shifting, our world is shifting, but don't forget about the little joys that you bring to people day to day, and how hopefully that can make a difference. So thank you guys. Thank you for the opportunity for us to do this.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you to everyone for joining this webinar presented by Folk Alliance International today. We hope that you found it useful. An extra special huge thank you to our esteemed panelists, David Macias, Megan West, Amy Reitnouer, Erin Benjamin, and Enrique Chi. This webinar will be made available as a recording on the Folk Alliance YouTube channel. Please take a moment to provide your feedback. Stay safe, stay connected, and as Megan said, stay authentic. Community, we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.